call the roll. I'm here.
Here. Councilmember Barrett. Here. Councilmember Clay. Councilmember Elrich. Councilmember Seamens.
Present.
Councilmember Williams.
Here.
I understand that Councilmember Clay will not be here this evening because she's not feeling well. Councilmember Elrich will be here a little bit later. He's attending a 5th grade promotion ceremony at his school. Are there any council comments or announcements? And then
I have a couple. The first thing I wanted to let my council colleagues and the public know is that I have decided to step aside from the county council race and sit this election season out and endorse Valerie Irvin. I think she's a terrific candidate, and I'm very happy to support her bid for the District 5 seat, and I think she'll be a terrific representative for us, so I hope that others will support her as well. Her kickoff event is June 19th, next Monday at 3 p.m. at Silver Spring International School, and I'm proud to be on her campaign team, and will definitely let you know about opportunities there will be to support her. The other two things that I wanted to bring to people's attention, the Safe Takoma group will meet this Wednesday night at 7 p.m. here at the community center, and they are now, given the council's support for the Safe Takoma initiative, starting to look at what goals they would like to achieve, what concrete measures, baseline, and continuing that can be used to assess our progress in meeting those goals, and really just get ready for launching this initiative. So I'm very excited about that. Unfortunately, I cannot attend that meeting on Wednesday night, but I will. I'm on the email list that they maintain, and I will keep you informed of what I find out. The second event is on Thursday, June 15th. It's the Nuclear Information Research group that has opened their headquarters in Takoma Park. They're in the 6930 Carroll Avenue building, and they're having their grand opening event on Thursday at 5 p.m. I believe it will be an open reception between 5 and 8. So I encourage my council colleagues to go to that. The office that they're opening is Suite 340 in that high-rise building. And I believe that's it. Thank you.
Yeah, two quick things. One, I won't be able to be here at the meeting next week. I'll be attending a National Association of Regional Councils meeting. And secondly, I put at everybody's place up here a brochure with information from the Humane Society of the United States concerning their effort to get people to use cage-free eggs. And this was brought to me by two residents of Ward 3 who are working on that campaign and wanted the city to take a supportive position on that. And so they have provided this information, and I'd like feedback from everybody. And if people are so inclined, we can put some kind of resolution on the agenda and go from there. And they also provided some extra packets of information, and I gave those to the clerk, so those will be available as well.
Thank you, Mayor Porter. I just wanted to remind everyone of the grand opening of the Phase 2 of the Community Center. They're calling it Rec Around the Block. It's being hosted by the Recreation Department. It's Thursday, June 15th. They're going to be entertaining the young people from grades 1 through 5, 4 p.m. till 6 p.m. And then later in the day, 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. will be grades 6 through 8. On Friday the 16th, all high school grades are invited to come during the time of 7 p.m. through 10 p.m. And this is, as I said, is the official opening of Phase 2 of the Community Center. There will be door prizes, refreshments, video games, some giveaways, music, some contests, table games, and pizza. So I know that all the council members will probably be wandering in and out during those 3 time periods. And I hope that all city residents will come, whether you have children or not.
Obviously, the June 15th is a very busy evening because also on this Thursday, June 15th, is the candidates forum that's being sponsored by the Takoma Voice and a number of neighborhood associations for the candidates for District 20, the legislative District 20, and that will be here also. So there will be a number of things going on here on the 15th in the evening. Is there anything else? Okay. If there is nothing else, we will move on to the minutes. We have 2 sets of minutes in front of us, and I appreciate the city clerk doing the fairly extensive changes and modifications to the minutes for the 24th of April. We have in front of us April 24th and May 8th. Would someone like to move adoption of minutes?
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion? All those in favor of adopting the minutes, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? The minutes are adopted. Next item on the agenda is the public comment period. This is the time set aside on the agenda for public comments on items that are not on our regular meeting agenda. We'll provide a time on the regular meeting items at the time those items come up, but this would be the time to speak on any of the work session items as well as any other item that you'd like to bring to the council's attention. And I will ask at this or another time when you come forward if you would identify yourself and keep your comments brief. There's a timer on the podium that will tell you when you've been speaking for 3 minutes, and I'll let you know, Pat.
Yep. My name's Patty Lovelace, 7620 Maple Avenue, Takoma Park, Maryland. And it's been brought to my attention that on Ritchie Road, or Ritchie Avenue up here, and Piney Branch Road, right near that intersection, there's seems to be, in a residential area, a limousine company up there. My friend David said he's having a hard time occasionally getting by it, because sometimes they have these large limousines there, and he was asking me, you know, does the city know about that? And also, is it a legal, legitimate company or what? And also, it's been brought to my attention too that you know that there's been more rowdy behavior down in our neighborhood too. And I was wondering if the police were aware of that. Also, I'd like to announce too that on June the 29th, in front of the Supreme Court, we're going to be starting a 4-day fast and vigil to protest the death penalty. We're going to be asking for total abolition of the death penalty. We're also going to be bringing to the city's attention and also to the state's attention, and the country's attention, about the barbaric practice of that. And also we're going to be asking to see if we can get Vernon Evans off of death row, because he's still on death row. And also we need as many Takoma Park residents out there as possible. I want my city of Takoma Park a peace activist city. I want it to be out there. And also, I'm going to be in the 4th of July parade carrying the big peace symbol. I'm very proud to represent my city, Takoma Park. And also, I'd like to ask the city, if possible, we need as much support against the death penalty. And also, I want you to know, Jamie Raskin is protesting the death penalty. He's also going to be doing whatever we can to stop the pushing through of the ICC. What is Takoma Park City Council planning on doing to help oppose the ICC? Because that's another kick in the face of the low income. It's a kick in the face of people who cannot afford cars. And it's also going to be a big business for big oil. We've got to do everything we can to get rid of the ICC. And please, we've got to do everything. And Jamie Raskin is doing everything he can. And that's one of the reasons I support Jamie Raskin. 2, I support Jamie Raskin for peace. 3, I support Jamie Raskin for the abolition of the death penalty and his support on gay rights and human rights. So please, get out there and register to vote, everybody, when you graduate high school. Enter the world of the adulthood. Get out there, register to vote, and I hope to see you out there at the primary. To vote. Thank you for letting me share.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yes.
I'd like to address Mr. Lovelace's concern about the limousines, and
Yeah.
I just want to let you know that I have talked with the owner of the limousine,
Yeah.
and we are working on a resolution to get that taken care of. He is seeking a proper place to park his car.
business.
Yeah.
But is that zoned for business? David was asking, because David, we almost, he had to slam his brakes on hard last week. When I was coming back from my doctor, he had to slam his brakes because one was sticking that kitty cat corner, you know?
Right. No, that is not, and that's why we're addressing that with the owner.
Maybe they could help him find an area in the business district where he can have his limousine company. That would be great for the city, you know that?
Right.
You know, because I don't want to see him out of business. I want to see him a peaceful, amicable solution to this problem.
And that's what we're working on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Terry.
Okay, would anyone else like to make a comment? All right, seeing no one else, we will move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the city manager's comments. We have the deputy city manager here with us, who I believe you've got we have a written report in our packets, and you also gave us some additional information.
First, I'd like to tell you that we passed the fire inspection today.
Oh, good.
The building inspector has been in, noted a few things which they're working on, and hopefully he'll be back tomorrow or first thing Wednesday morning, so get the building open for the grand opening. Barbara has presented you the financial report up to date. Unless there's any questions, which I probably cannot answer, but I'll be glad to take them back to her and get you some answers.
I had noticed one question. Excuse me, and this is in the material that we just received this evening. One of the noted shaded items is repaint multi-purpose room. Which multi-purpose room is that? I mean, we have several things in the building that are called multi-purpose rooms.
As far as I know, it's the azalea room is what
Okay.
we usually refer to as the multi-purpose room.
Okay, all right, thank you. Are there any other questions? I don't see any. Was there anything else on your list to talk to us
No,
about?
that's all I have this evening.
Okay. Well, we are running a bit ahead of schedule here. And so I think I see we have at least some of the folks who were here for interviews. So why don't we just go ahead and begin that? We have a committee that the council is setting up to look at the impact of the potential move of Washington Adventist Hospital. As people probably know, the hospital has delayed by a year the date of its move. But the council is still very interested in having a group put together both to advise us, and I think the additional year gives us some additional time to prepare, as well as to work with the county, which is doing a county-wide look at health services. And so we would hope that the members of this committee can work with the county on that and keep the county aware of the city's concerns, as well as keeping the city aware of what the county is doing. So I'm very glad that we have some folks here tonight who have applied to be on the Health Services Impact Committee. John Conger, Frederick Hefflinger, Pat Lovelace, and Joanne Wu. If you could come up here and just sit at the, do you know where it is, Pat? If you could just sit at the table up here.
There's a microphone right in front of you. Okay. Basically, chair.
There you go. I believe we have everyone except Mr. Hefflinger.
Yep, thank you. Yep.
And I'd like to welcome you all and to thank you for your interest in this committee. I think what I'm probably going to do is I see you sort of sitting there in a line. I'm going to start over there with John Conger and ask you, first of all, why you're interested in being on this committee and what you think you can contribute to it.
Sure. I guess the way I look at it is more from a neighborhood perspective. First, from a neighborhood perspective. I live only a couple blocks from the hospital, up here on 7611 Maple. The hospital is part of the community. You'll notice between here and the hospital that it is largely tenant, largely low income. Not everybody has a car. Not everybody can drive a car. Folks have moved into this community in part because the hospital's here. I'm not saying that that was my motivation. I'm saying that there are a lot of people in our neighborhood that are like that, and that it's important to have on this committee somebody that'll speak to their interests. Now, I've had experience, working on city committees before. I've enjoyed the participation and the contribution. I was part of the TASD committee, and that was a very valuable experience for me, and I hope I made a contribution. Part of the Community Development Block Grant Committee, and I'm actually the chair of the Citizens Advisory Committee. And in addition to being on the board of my condominium, the Takoma Phoenix, it's a contribution that I would like to make. That's the short version of the statement, I guess.
Well, thank you for that, and I'm also delighted to note that we have 2 Ward 4 residents. I know sometimes it's been difficult to get Ward 4 residents, and I'm delighted to see that we've got 2 people from Ward 4 who are interested in participating in this. So I thank you. Thank you both for your interest. What I'm going to do is, I think, ask the same question of all 3 candidates, and then see if other council members have additional questions they'd like to ask. Ms. Wu, can you answer the same question, why you're interested in the committee and what you think you can bring to it?
The answer to why I'm interested in being in the committee is 3-part. I'm also in the neighborhood directly around the hospital. I live on Lincoln Avenue. Closer? Okay. I'm in the neighborhood in the vicinity of the hospital on Lincoln Avenue, so I'm personally affected by changes that may happen in that area. Recently moved to Takoma Park a little more than a year ago, but in that space of a year, a family member had to use the services of the emergency department of the hospital. So personally, I'm indebted to their services. And as a healthcare provider, I'm interested in having some kind of healthcare service stay within the city for me to refer to. And I'm sorry, the second part of the question is?
What you think you can bring to it. I don't know that they're separate parts of a question, but why you're interested in what you think you can bring to the committee.
Well, I suppose my personal perspective and my professional perspective as a healthcare provider. Again, I'm new to the city, and so I don't have near the committee membership experience that my colleagues have, but that about sums it up.
Well, I appreciate that, and certainly I think it is a good perspective to have healthcare professionals involved in this also. Pat, do you want to tell us why you're interested in what you think you can bring to the committee?
Yes, you know me. My name's Patty Lovelace. I'm also a resident of Ward 4. I live on 7620 Maple Avenue. I'm interested in the committee because as a person who is heavily relying on that hospital, I'm one of the ones who are in real danger if that hospital is to vacate or to move, because it's going to be much harder for me. I'm also living in disability, senior citizen, and low income subsidized housing. And a lot of those people there are in fear of when the hospital closes. You know, I've been on other committees before. I've been on the Hiroshima and Nagasaki Peace Committee. I've been on several other committees organizing protests against the war and the death penalty. And also as a peace activist, and also as an American citizen, there's a lot more to being an activist than just waving around a flag or doing a march. I think this is one time that I can really serve my city and really serve my population, you know, because maybe somehow something good can come of my serious health condition, to being totally blind, multiple amputee, and recently had to been in that emergency room myself 2 or 3 times, once with broken back, and a couple of times last year with the same condition, you know, the bone erosion. And again, I was back in there in January because I was very sick. And I and I dread what's going to happen if that hospital had been closed. I would probably not have made it, because when I got to the hospital, I was not breathing right. And I don't remember too much of being in the emergency room. I'd hate to think about what's going to happen to me. But not just what's happening to me, that's a selfish thought. What's going to happen to my other residents of my ward, of my city, if that hospital leaves? I don't know very many cities this big that was not going to have a hospital. You know, they're going to say, turn their backs on a low income. We cannot let that happen. You know, and as an activist, I cannot sit back and watch my constituents, my neighbors, go down the toilet. You know, some people refer to me as the peace walker, some people call me a peace delegate, but whatever you want to call me a friend. I want to serve my people, my city. I want to do what is right for once. And I believe being in that personal situation and bringing a personal perspective to the committee can know what it's like, not just reading about it, but knowing from somebody who has been saved by that hospital and who relies on that hospital and who does not know from one day to the next if I'm going to be back in that hospital. And God forbid if that hospital is gone. That's why I'm interested, and I believe from my personal experience, I think I have a lot of different ideas to offer. And I may be able to get the community galvanized to help keep the hospital, I'm hoping.
Well, thank you very much. We appreciate your interest, and you're right, that's certainly a very valuable perspective. We're running a bit ahead of schedule, and I wonder, are you Mr. Hefflinger? Yes. Oh, do you want to come up and join us? We're a bit ahead of schedule. Apologies. You're right on time, and we're early. So, but you came in at exactly the right time because we were going to turn to the fourth chair. So,
thank you.
What I've been asking the other people who are interested in being on the committee, I've been asking them why they're interested in participating in the committee and what they think they can bring to the discussion. And so I'll ask you the same thing.
Well, I'm interested because I think the facility provides an opportunity to the community, and it's not something that should just be untended and abandoned. And I thought I might be useful. I'm a CPA and member of the fellow of the Healthcare Financial Management Association. I've been working in the hospital field as reimbursement director or manager or budget director for the last 24 years. I work for Medicaid in the district now. I worked for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts originally for about 4 years at the beginning of my career. And I've been with hospitals since, except for the last year when I came back and joined Medicaid in the district.
Well, I also noticed that, as you said, you've been involved in financial issues with a number of hospitals and regulatory agencies also.
Yeah.
So that's certainly a useful perspective also. Are there questions the other council members have for the folks who are interested in the committee? Terry.
Thank you, Mayor Porter, and thank all four of you for volunteering for this committee. I really appreciate it. I think that's, you know, the contributions of the residents of the city is what makes the city work, and I appreciate your stepping forward. My question really is for this council, and that is, are we willing to put in the extra effort that the city needs to do to accommodate the physical shortcomings of one of the applicants, and that is, you know, are we willing to provide audio tapes support for Mr. Lovelace so that he would be able to fully participate in the committee?
I'm sure we can do what's necessary. We make provisions when, you know, someone needs it, and I'm sure we can do that. And the deputy city manager is nodding his head over there.
Mr. Seamens?
Okay. Yes.
May I mention that I got a small micro cassette recorder today at the Radio Shack, so when I need it at the committees, I can record the things since I have not much left in my hands or my eyesight to write things down.
So this is in anticipation of an affirmative vote on
Yes.
the council?
It's partly for that and partly for other things when I need it. Because there's other things I'm going to be needing it for also.
Okay.
Very good.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Very good idea. And if there's other kinds of things that you need, either for that or
Oh, yeah, there will be.
or for the participating in the council meetings, we
Yeah.
can do that.
Very good. Thank you.
Are there other questions from other members of the council? I saw Joy's hand. Did Doug also?
I'm just interested in the committee members having a balanced perspective on the hospital. I'm very concerned that the hospital would move far away from Takoma Park. What I'm aware of is that they're constrained by the property they're on. What would each of you say your ability to kind of look at the situation objectively with them, with community members to evaluate what can be done in a collaborative fashion with the hospital?
You want to start with me again?
Sure. Go ahead.
The way I look at these types of issues is problem solving constrained by interests. I mean, it is certainly an interest of the community to maintain healthcare services. I mean, that's part of the question that we're all dealing with here. Is the solution to have the hospital there? Well, it certainly has worked for a very long time. But the question on the table is, if they move, how do we address those needs? And so it's not I guess whether the hospital stays or leaves, I remain open-minded. I would certainly hope that they could retain a clinic at the site at the very least, should they decide to leave, because that is one way to provide ongoing healthcare services to this community. That said, you can't come into a situation like this having an answer pre-decided. You have to, clearly we're going to be provided with a great deal of information that we're going to be able to assess, evaluate, discussions we're going to have, interests we're going to be able to understand as we talk to more and more people. So you can't go in with the answer pre-decided. I guess that's where I'm.
I suppose I would echo that. I think the twist I would place on it is I think it's important to determine the needs of all parties involved. So, for instance, of the hospital, of different groups within the hospital, perhaps, of the community and the different groups within the community. What tends to happen between parties in dialogue is that one or the other or both parties will jump to a solution or a strategy for solving the problem without identifying the basic needs behind the problem. And I found in my work, with individuals at any rate, that identifying the basic needs underlying everything enables everybody involved to take a breath and take a step back and find strategies that meet all of those needs. There's more than one way to do almost everything.
Okay.
Yes, I could approach it with an open mind also, but I'd also like to get the feedback from my community, from the low-income community, as well as the residents of Ward 4 and all the other wards of the city, and also find out what the hospital is willing to do to meet those needs. Whether it's, if they move, are they going to, I would like to see them keep a clinic in the area. An idea I had is if they could keep that hospital in that area and have a satellite area at the same time. That way they could have their cake and eat it too. Because they could use this hospital to fund the other hospital as it's being built. And then possibly they could keep both campuses open, like other hospitals have done. Some hospitals in Massachusetts have done that. Some hospitals around the country have done that. Look, Mayo Clinic's got more than one campus, and other hospitals have got more than one campus. And it'd be nice if they could do that. But yeah, I'd like to hear from the hospital side on what they could do to help low income, and also hear from my community what we would like to see the hospital do. And also, if they do switch and if they do change and move, I would like to have a solution in place so that our community is not, again, left in a lurch.
Okay.
Well, I think of myself as a professional, and with that comes technical expertise and objectivity. So I don't have an axe to grind one way or the other. I know how to interpret financial statements and cost reports. I'm used to looking at big picture as for hospital expansions in terms of CON requirements or DON requirements and market share and dollars and cents. I thought these would be useful. I don't have a bias one way or the other, except I do think it's an opportunity to be looked at. Whatever this situation resolves itself into, this is going to be, the bricks and mortar will still be there, and I'd like to have that turned to good use.
Well, I really do appreciate each of you for stepping forward. I think that that you will each be an asset to the deliberation that will go on. Thank you.
Let's assume for a minute that the hospital was able to find a location within the city of Takoma Park, an alternative place. Would you be comfortable making recommendations that might infuriate some of your fellow citizens who might be in opposition to the new location because it would be near them in a way that might cause them some distress with traffic and noise and so forth?
I'll start again, I guess, because I'm over on this side. Well, I think that that's part of the evaluation, isn't it? I mean, we're talking about competing interests. And obviously the initial charge is to deal with healthcare issues. But if the recommendation causes new problems, I would imagine that those have to be weighed as part of the process as well. So, you know, it's sort of the question. I have to ask a question about the underlying question, in that the point is to try and find the optimal solution, not necessarily, you know, cut the baby in half. You know, not necessarily say, well, we found an optimal healthcare solution, even if it causes a traffic solution. You got to deal with those problems as they come up.
My answer to that question would be that I imagine it would cause me distress to infuriate someone else in the community. Ideally, in my perhaps naive world, those parties would be part of the discussion, and usually when people feel infuriated, angry, whatnot, there's some basic need that's not being met. And one of those basic needs is usually the need to be heard, at the very least. So my hope would be that that point of infuriation, if it had to be reached, would at least be ratcheted down quite a few notches, where there could be a civilized dialogue and mutual understanding around the strategy that's eventually chosen.
Okay.
Yep. And I realize no matter which direction we go in, no matter what our recommendation is going to be, somebody's going to cry. So you know that. Somebody's going to complain. Somebody's not going to be happy with it. Somebody's going to be infuriated, and somebody's going to want to go nuts. And we're not going to be able to appease everybody. And my goal would be to find the best solution for everybody involved. Now, if it's traffic needs, what can we do to help appease the traffic? Can we reroute some of the traffic? Can we redirect some of the roads? It would be very nice to keep the hospital in Takoma Park. Yes, it would be. But if there was no other solution to it, I would like to see what would be best for my community, best for my ward, and best for my city. Now, I know, like I just said, no matter what our recommendations are, somebody is going to cry. No matter what you say, somebody is going to have a beef. And my solution to that would be, if they have a beef, they can come to the committee and discuss it, and maybe we can help them with the solution. Maybe even they, as a complainer, can be part of the solution, rather than be something to be dreaded. That's the way I look at it. You know, no matter how you look at it, someone is not going to be happy, and I'd invite them also to come in and maybe give them some ideas, and they can give us some ideas. As human beings, we all got to work together to find a proper solution to this.
Okay.
I used to be a soccer referee, and you call the game the way you see it. I don't think it would be arrogant, I hope it's not arrogant, to say that I think if I have an opinion, I can keep to that opinion despite having people getting angry at me.
There's one additional question that I'd just like to put to all of you. The council is very interested in this committee for a number of reasons. We're looking for people on the committee who have their own areas of expertise, but we're also looking to include as large a section of the community as we can within the constraints of the number of people who could make a workable committee, though obviously we can't include everyone. And so I would be interested in any thoughts that you might have on getting the thoughts and ideas of the remainder of the community as the committee does its work. I think that, I forget who made the point, but to a certain extent, you're not going to be able to foresee how this will evolve, how the process will unfold. And I think that it would be impossible to go ahead and talk to people at the beginning and then assume that that's going to take care of it for the 2-year life of the committee. I hope you all know that we've established a 2-year life for the committee with, possible option to continue it if there's still a need at that point. So I would be interested in hearing all of you talk a little bit about how you would see involving other members of the community in the process and in the thinking process that you would use for this. I think, John, you're the person who's gotten stuck with being first.
The best way that I can answer that question is to draw from previous experience. In previous committees in this community, TASD I had in mind in particular, we had an opportunity at the beginning of every meeting for public comment. We also had a couple of opportunities at the council to present status updates where you get a wider audience who are able to comment. I will say that we didn't get people showing up to our meetings to comment, but that the opportunity was provided. We advertised our meetings, and when folks didn't take advantage of that. Actually, most of the comments came from the council. But that's good, because each one of you represents lots of other people. And, if somebody in the community has an idea, a thought, a contribution, and they don't know who's on this committee, they're going to go to one of you. And then that's what y'all do, is represent. And you bring the stuff to the committee. So that is probably the most efficient way for it to work. But I'm sure we could come up with other ideas. Like you said, it's 2 years. That's a lot of opportunities for comment.
Okay.
Again, pardon my naivete, but perhaps the committee could also make a little bit of an outreach effort. The group that comes to my mind foremost is folks in the profession similar to mine. So there's several healthcare practitioners within the city of Takoma Park who I think would be affected by a hospital move or change. So outreaching to that population, outreaching to other populations that would be affected as committee members or as council members, identify those populations, and then perhaps through the public comment process, other groups again could be identified and reached out to. Again, it might be naive on my behalf to think that we could expend that kind of effort, but again, I do think people become more irate when they feel they haven't been heard or haven't been informed, and to make an outreach effort as much as possible is important.
Yes. Pat?
Yeah, also, I think we should, if possible, to try and see if we can get some representatives of the senior citizens community on the committee, too. That would be really nice. I don't know how old people are here. I cannot see them or even guess. But probably none of my business. But also, if we could get some representatives from the elderly and senior communities on our committee, because I'm sure they have a lot of things to contribute. And again, we may have 2 years, but like he said, it's a long time. But 2 years can go by like that, and before you know it, the 2 years is over. And we got to look at it that way too. That 2 years is not to waste and let the time go by, because personal experience tells me those 2 years are going to go by fast, and we got a job to do, we got a community to reach out to, and I'd like to see what we could do to reach out to the people who do not have a voice, the people who rely on that hospital. They may have solutions to it that we don't even know about, and I think we should try to reach out to them. And also, we should do everything we can to publicize the committee meetings and invite people to come in. Not everybody reads the Gazette. Not everybody reads the Voice. Maybe we should post the notices in senior citizens' buildings and community centers.
Those are good ideas, yes.
I just think it's my responsibility to listen to people and to express my opinions as well. I live within 2 blocks of the site. That's a factor, I suppose. It might be viewed as a prejudice. It might also be viewed as I'm more involved because I'm closer. But I think I'm just here to help the process. If I can contribute the skills, then probably be useful to have me.
Are there any other questions from the council?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Of y'all?
Yes.
How do you see this committee, what's the charter? What's the result at the end of 2 years that you are looking for from any of these applicants?
Well, have you seen the resolution that we put together? I think it's a little difficult to say what we expect the outcome to be, because we're not sure what the ground rules. The committee was originally formed because we believed that it was a fair certainty that the hospital was going to be moving within very short order. That was their plan, within a 5-year period. And so I think the original idea behind the committee was to take a look at some of the impacts of that move and see whether there were things that the city could do to alleviate some of those impacts. Now that the hospital has postponed their initial application for a new certificate of need or the moving of their beds, I think it opens up some additional possibilities for the committee. And in addition, the county now has an interest in looking at this issue from a countywide perspective. My understanding is that they're going to consider a number of issues, including the impact on the communities that are farther from the hospital if the hospital were to move. But I understand they're also going to be looking at things like the apportioning of services between the various hospitals, because obviously if one of them moves, it shifts the populations who come to each hospital. So I think they're going to be looking at some of those issues also. And so, I mean, we're talking about, the resolution talked about gathering information, looking at that information, looking at what other kinds of things are going on, and making recommendations to the council. I'm not sure at this point, since the whole situation is fairly uncertain, that we can give you a much more specific answer than that. But I can assure you, we have used, and Mr. Conger was on one of the previous committees, we have used committees to deal with fairly important issues within our community, and their recommendations have always been extremely useful. And we very much appreciate the efforts that they've put into doing that. And so I guess I can say that I'm sure this committee will be in addition to the process. It's difficult at this point to see where we will be in 2 years.
Thank you.
Did you want to add something?
Yes, if I can just add to that is try to clarify it a little more. First of all, I think that when the committee gets underway, that it would be helpful for committee members to look back at the discussion that this council had in forming this committee. During that discussion, my recollection is we talked about actually the need for 2 different committees. This particular one to address the health care needs of the community, and another separate committee that would actually be looking at the facility itself and what recommendations that residents might have for how the current site of the Washington Adventist Hospital should be used in the future. And again, that was all, based on the assumption that the hospital is relocating. The schedules changed some, and the council had decided at that time that maybe the question of healthcare issues and the healthcare needs of the community is something that is independent of the hospital moving to some degree, because we want to know what the healthcare needs are of the community, and it's especially important because of the pending relocation of the hospital. But I think that distinction is important. That we're not really talking about how that property is going to be used next is not the primary concern at this point. It is really assessing the healthcare needs and how we can continue to ensure that those needs are met in this community.
I got one question for the council also is, I think it's a little bit premature to say that, we want to figure out what to do with the site of the hospital. That's like automatically assuming that the issue is dead, because I think that would definitely send the wrong message out to the community, because the issue is not dead. We don't know if the hospital is going to move yet. We're not 100% sure. We may be able to have a recommendation on that. We may be able to have a recommendation on what to do with the site even. We don't know yet. But the main thing is, like Terry was saying, I think we need to address the health care needs of our community and health care needs of our neighbors, our seniors, our low income, as well as our high income and everybody else in our city. We need to find out the health care needs before we even think about what we're going to do with the site. That's like, it's already dead. There's nothing but a skeleton there. But right now, it's not dead. We shouldn't even look at that issue right now. Right now, I think the committee we're putting together now is the best step. Find out what the community needs first. Don't just don't assume the issue is dead, because it's not.
Okay. Bruce, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, just in response to Mr. Lovelace's last comment, we agree. That's why we're putting together this committee first. And I wanted to thank you all for your interest in this. And I have a question for my colleagues on the council. I want to get a clarification on what we're thinking with we have that the committee is going to consist of approximately 12 to 15 members, and then there are at least 5 slots that are talked about for ex officio positions from people from the district and Prince George's and Montgomery County, representative of the hospital on the Washington Health, it says Washington Adventist Hospital Center. Center on Health Disparities. And so are those ex officio slots part of the 12 to 15 or in addition to the 12 to 15? I'm thinking about it in terms of we've now interviewed 4 people tonight. There are 3 people coming in another week or so, and I wanted to kind of get the sense of how we're going to approach this.
My understanding was that the folks representing the health departments and Washington Adventist Hospital would be ex officio members,
right,
and so they wouldn't count against the 12 to 15.
Okay. I wanted to get that clarification.
I mean, perhaps I should ask Jesse. I think that's what we said, and I believe that we've got. I'll also turn to Jesse because she's setting up the interviews. I think we've got some people also coming next week. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay.
There are several people next week, and also one person scheduled for July who was not available this month.
The intention would be to go ahead and interview all of the people who have applied for the committee before we do any of the appointments. And so it's looking, if we have somebody coming up in July, it's looking like it may be July before we'll go ahead and set the committee up. But I very much appreciate all of you volunteering for this. I'm very much impressed by both the depth of your expertise or representation and also the breadth of it that we have represented at the table. So I feel very good about the number of people and the kinds of people who have applied for this. So thank you all very much. And what we'll do is we'll let you know when we've done the appointments. And you're welcome to come back if you wanted to observe any of the council meetings. But you don't need to do that if you don't want to. Thank you all very much.
One question before I leave.
Yes.
Have they approached any nurses or any doctors who work at the hospital to come to see how this would affect their jobs?
I don't know that
Or any oddly?
we've directly recruited anyone. We've sort of put the information out there, but one of the things that the council certainly has the option to do is after we've interviewed all the candidates, if we feel that there are holes in the expertise, we could go out and try and find someone to fill those holes.
That'd be good.
Well, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor Porter.
The next, we're now moving to our regular meeting agenda, and we are moving to take up the first of the budget-related ordinances. We have 3 ordinances related to the budget and 2 to pay plans. So the first one is the ordinance having to do with the fiscal '07 tax rate. This is the second reading of the ordinance. As we said when we brought it up the first time, the proposed tax rate is the same as that proposed by the city manager early in May, which would be 63 cents per $100 of assessed valuation for real property.
Move approval.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any council comments? Terry?
Yes, Mayor Porter, I would just like to reiterate what I said last week, and that is express my concern that as we're considering this tax rate, that we're also, in the short period of time, we're going to be considering allowing landlords to pass through tax increases to the tenants. And in the past, I have expressed concern about our tax rate and the increases in tax rate because of the impact that could have on our lowest income residents, who in most, the lowest income residents are renters. And my concern, always in the past, the answer has been that, well, although landlords could pass through tax increases through a hardship petition, very few landlords have actually done that. But if we make that an automatic thing when we change our rent stabilization law later, tax increase could present real hardship on the lowest income residents of this community. And I mentioned that. I support the work that we did on the budget this year, but I'm beginning my lobbying against the idea of automatically passing through the tax increases on the rent stabilization changes.
I certainly wouldn't assume that that's the way the council would make a decision. I mean, that they would decide to go ahead and do that. I think that that's still an open question. Anyone else? Is there any public comments on the tax rate? All right, seeing none, this is the second reading of the ordinance. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Porter?
Aye.
Councilmember Austin-Lane? Aye. Councilmember Berry? Aye. Councilmember Clay? Councilmember Elridge? Councilmember Seamens?
Aye.
Councilmember Williams?
Aye.
The ordinance passes its second reading. The second is the ordinance to adopt a stormwater management budget, but before we do that, we have to organize ourselves as the Stormwater Management Committee. Does someone
So
want to move?
moved.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, we are now sitting as the Stormwater Management Board. So as we take up the stormwater management budget, does someone want to move the ordinance?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any council comments on the ordinance? We should note that the stormwater ordinance envisions, and as a matter of fact, would institute an increase in the individual household stormwater management fee to $48 a year, which is an increase. It's a fairly large increase, but the stormwater management fee has not been increased in a number of years, and we are starting to see the impacts of some of the environmental regulations and other things that we need to do and other increases in costs. Bruce?
If I can just add that the presentation made by the city engineer, I guess, maybe 2 or 3 months ago now, I thought made a very compelling case for the need for doing this.
Is there any additional council comments on this?
This is, yes, something actually, as I was looking back in my notes from last year's budget discussion, that I asked for the city manager to make sure that was scrutinized for this year, and though we've heard from residents that this is, the stormwater fund has never been discussed as the way that we pay for our engineers' salary. It indeed has been discussed many times, and I'm glad that we are consistent now with what the original policy was. So I appreciate that the city manager did take a long look at this, and I hope, Wayne, that you will make sure that all the staff who are involved know of our appreciation.
Any other council comments? Are there any public comments on the stormwater management budget? All right, seeing none, will the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Porter?
Aye.
Councilmember Austin Lane?
Aye.
Councilmember Barry?
Aye.
Councilmember Clay? Councilmember Elrich? Councilmember Seamens?
Aye.
Councilmember Williams?
Aye.
The stormwater management budget passes at second reading. The next ordinance is the ordinance adopting the budget for fiscal year 2007. Somebody want to move the budget?
So moved.
Well, one of
Second.
them, okay. One of them is moved and one of them is seconded. The total appropriation under this budget, just making sure I'm reading off the right line. Yes.
There's a change to this from what was read in the first reading.
Right, that's what I was actually looking for.
Right.
Oh, I guess it's on the front.
It's just the last paragraph on the front.
That's where it is, yes. This is, and my assumption is that the mover and seconder intended to move the revised ordinance with the changes that were delineated at our last budget discussion by the city manager. Okay, all right. Is there any council comments on this budget? We had a fairly extensive discussion of the city budget, including several work sessions throughout the month of May, and went through this department by department and ending up with a reconciliation discussion where we talked about all the things that the council had wanted to have additional discussion on at the end, or new items that were brought up. And we did come to the budget that is basically recognized here. Differs in addition to the items that the council added during reconciliation. It also differs from the original budget in that there is additional funding for healthcare costs, additional healthcare costs for the staff. We have put in the purchase of an elevator cab to put into the existing place for it. And there have been, trying to look at the bigger things here. I think those were the biggest items in terms of the changes. There were also a number of items that got moved because of purchase timing issues from fiscal 06 to fiscal 07, and so they would be in the fiscal 07 budget also. But other than that, other than all of those changes, it's based on the budget that the city manager gave us, and has a total of $19,443,569. And I believe that that's the most recent figure, isn't that?
What was it again? I'm sorry, Mayor.
The $19,443,569.
It's $19,792,767.
Okay. So you're saying that what's actually written in the ordinance is not the most recent one?
That's correct.
What's on the blue sheet is more recent than that. Okay. Well, I'm glad I clarified that. Yes. Okay, there it is. So the mover and seconder were moving the $19,792,767 budget.
What if we said no?
We'd have to start over. Okay. I think unless someone objects, that's what's on the table. All right. Are there any other council comments? Are there any public comments on the budget? All right. Seeing none, will the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Porter?
Aye.
Councilmember Austin Lane?
Aye.
Councilmember Barry?
Aye.
Councilmember Clay? Councilmember Elrich? Councilmember Seamens?
Aye.
Councilmember Williams?
Aye.
The budget passes at second reading. Now, we will move on to two associated ordinances, one which adopts the pay plan for management and non-union staff, and the other which adopts the pay plan for the police. We have a third one which is still in negotiation and isn't ready to be put before the council?
As soon as AFSCME's ready to start negotiations.
Okay, it will be in negotiation as soon as they're ready, is what you're saying, okay.
At some point.
And at the point at which it's finished, it'll come before the council. So the first one we will take up will be the ordinance, the pay plan for staff who are, for management and staff who are not covered by a collective bargaining agreement. Would someone like to move that?
So move.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any council comments on this ordinance? Any public comments on the ordinance? All right, seeing none, will the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Porter?
Aye.
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 The ordinance passes at second reading. And the second one is the pay scale for police officers. Would someone like to move the ordinance?
So move.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any council comments? Any public comments on this ordinance? All right, seeing none, will the clerk please call the roll?
Aye.
Aye.
Councilmember Clay? Councilmember Elrich? Councilmember Seamens?
Aye.
Councilmember Williams?
Aye.
Nice save. The ordinance passes its second reading. I don't think it matters what order, actually. I think it's still legal. And then the next item will be the budget amendment number 6 to the current budget, the fiscal '06 budget. Does somebody want to summarize what's in this? Did you want to?
I can do that if I can find it. Here it is. What it does is it moves money from, takes money out of the general fund and puts it into the FY06 budget, and then moves the expenditures from, the revenues from the Piney Branch sale and the state bond of $350,000, which we're not going to receive until FY07. So that was moved into the FY07 budget. And in order to balance the FY06 budget, we had to do a general fund transfer.
Okay, and I believe that the other thing is that it, when it adds the Piney Branch properties, it adds slightly less than we had originally anticipated, because the amount that we received was, I'm scanning it here for the, it's a small amount, was slightly less than we had anticipated.
And then there are some minor other changes in the
Right.
amendment.
Yes. Okay, would someone like to move this ordinance?
So move.
Okay, this is the first reading of the ordinance. Is there any council comments on this ordinance? Any public comments on the ordinance? All right, seeing none, all those in favor of the ordinance at first reading, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ordinance passes at first reading, and I think we're going to try and take it up for second reading next week. The final item on our regular meeting agenda is the consent agenda. There's 2 items on the consent agenda. One is a resolution making appointments to the Commission on Landlord-Tenant Affairs. The other is a resolution providing for appointments to the Facade Advisory Board. Consent agenda is not open for discussion unless someone wishes to move an item off the consent agenda. Does someone want to move the consent agenda?
So move.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor of the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The consent agenda passes. All right, we are moving now to the first item on our work session budget, which is the discussion of the Neighborhood Business Works program financing for the Old Tacoma Business Association. I notice we have a couple people here for that. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm Rosalind Grigsby. I'm the Executive Director of the Old Tacoma Business Association. And this is John Hume. He's Chair of the Main Street Design Committee. And we are requesting a resolution of support from the council for a grant application we submitted last week to the Department of Housing at the state of Maryland for a matching funds grant. And we requested $75,000, and our proposal is that it would be available to all businesses of Main Street, Takoma, which is the Maryland Main Street, Takoma, and each business owner would put up half the money and we would match half for various kinds of facade improvements. We have had a small grant of $15,000 from the state of Maryland to do this for the past year, so this would operate in the same manner through the facade improvement committee that's already established and with the guidelines that are already established. And John has actually been overseeing this for the last year, and so we'd like to field any questions.
Terry?
I'd just like to hear some about the results over the last year.
Well, thus far, we've entailed slightly more than a third of the $15,000 which we received last year. That $15,000 was to last us through a two-year cycle. We've, as I said, given out slightly more than $5,000. This is as reimbursement for projects. One for window improvements for a property which has been bought and is being renovated on Carroll Avenue, and one for a major repainting job, including roof repair and repainting, also on a business structure on Carroll Avenue. We have distributed 15 application packets for the facade improvement program. 2 have been returned, completed, and acted upon, and I'm anticipating another 4 that are in various stages of the paperwork. In some cases, for facade improvement proposals, there are 2 or more other levels of oversight which have to be gone through before they come to the design committee. Whether the facade advisory board, the Montgomery County Historic Preservation Commission. So there is a 1, 2, 3 process which has to be followed in some cases. So there is a timeline involved, but we've been running on our own sort of self-imposed limits for the size of these reimbursements, so that we could drag out the $15,000 over the two-year cycle. The size of this, were we to actually hit a home run, would give us some good breathing space. We could actually make some major improvements to Main Street, Takoma, and the Takoma Park Business District.
And what goals do you hope to attain with this additional funding?
Well, we hope to make our business district more pedestrian friendly, more customer friendly, more business friendly. National Main Street program estimates a $4 for $1 return on facade improvement money. That's in the first year. You stretch that out over a 5 or 10 year period. Some of that money is going to find its way back into city coffers. It's an investment. It's not spending money. It's investing money.
Thank you.
You said you had some number of projects in the pipeline. Do you have a sense of, just sort of a ballpark sense of, if all those projects were to come through, what half of that, the reimbursable half of that, would be?
Let me think.
Not an exact number, but
no, you're not going to get an exact number from me. We've got a good $12,000 to $15,000 in potential improvements just coming back on the next 4, of which we would be reimbursing half. So it would whittle down on our current draw.
So between the money that you've already given out and that would exhaust nearly all of your current
6, 11.
fund.
Yeah, we'd have a little bit of headroom, but not a lot.
Right. And if something came in a little higher than you anticipate, that could eat the little bit of margin you've got.
I used to be a contractor. That's almost assured.
All right. Are there other questions?
Yes. Slightly off point, but I hope it won't put you in an awkward position. Could you, or would you care to comment on the the condition of parking in downtown Takoma Park, and you may be aware of one or more proposals that are floating around that would add parking spaces, including one of them, which would require the developer to borrow some money. Could you comment?
I don't know the specifics of that proposal. I do know the general outline. I forwarded the information on to Dan Robinson, who is head of the Economic Restructuring Committee. They have actually scheduled a parking survey for June 24th, a Saturday, from the Takoma Junction to the Takoma Theater, essentially, with the intent to count, map, and note the usage of all the parking spaces we can find along the corridor. So I think that'll give us a starting point, a quantifiable sense of the basis we have now. I wouldn't want to comment on the question of loaning the funds involved. I don't know the specifics.
It would be helpful to better understand in the context of the study that you're encountering or you're contemplating. I think that would be maybe helpful in looking at that other question.
And I would just like to add that new construction and acquisition money for new properties, new construction, are ineligible activities for the facade improvement program.
Are there other questions? What would the council like to do with this? Well, I mean, this is a work session issue, so the question is the council willing to go forward with this? I'm assuming so, unless I hear otherwise.
Yeah, I see no downside.
Yeah. So I think I'm hearing widespread support up here, pretty unanimous support. So we'll go ahead and schedule it. You have a deadline on this, I think.
We have already submitted the grant proposal. It was due June 2nd.
Okay. So you just need to get all the paperwork in as soon as possible.
That's right. And they knew it was a very short turnaround, so the Department of Housing knew we wouldn't probably have the resolution in hand, but we would submit it as soon as it were available.
Well, I'll just add, I really appreciate you continuing to make strides with the Main Street program and the Business Association, and welcome to your new post. I'm very glad to meet you.
Yes, I see that it is scheduled for next week, so we'll move it forward as quickly as we can.
Great.
And I'm not assuming that you'll have any problem with it. We very much appreciate the work that the Business Association does, and we are very glad to see you involved in the Main Street program, and so we're very supportive of this kind of effort.
And if there are any other ways that we can be supportive of your work at such a low price, we appreciate the opportunities.
We'll let you know.
We'll be back.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. The council is going to take a very short recess and come back for the final two items on our work session agenda.
You lost it, Pat.
the rest of the council can join us up here, we can probably finish close to on time, or maybe even before.
Not if I can help it.
Huh?
I'm coming. I'm coming.
Well, if you're going to leave, there's our quorum. We'll go ahead. Okay, we will resume with our work session items. The first one is the discussion of a new pension system, which is being offered by the state, and the deputy city manager is going to brief us on this, and then we will have a discussion of where we want to go with it.
Back in 1998, the state upgraded its pension system to what we are currently in. And they've just now done another upgrade which changes one of the factors in the system and provides a considerably substantial increase in what an employee would get upon retirement. The city, as a contributing, as a member of the plan, has the option of entering into that plan or staying where we are, and it's a one-time option. We have a year to make up our minds, but there's a downside to that, and I'll talk to that in a minute. Under the plan, the factor which is used in for time after June 30th, 1998 would increase from 0.014 to 0.018 for all the years of service. And it's 0.012 for years of service prior to June 30, 1998.
So that means the people who retire get a larger percentage of their final year's salary?
Yes, and it's based on final average plus years of service plus the factor.
Okay.
In order to fund this, the state has said that the employee in the plan would, their contribution rate would increase by 1% over the next 3 years to a 5% contribution. They're currently contributing 2%. And that would have to start July 1 of '06. It's not an option. It would have to start then. So if we were to wait a year, they would owe a year in arrears. Then it would have to be paid. The city does not incur any additional expense until FY08 under the plan. Then there's a surcharge added to the what we contribute now. For FY07, we're contributing 8.1% of salaries. This would increase by, I think it's 1.75%. But the dollars that the city would have to, the increase in dollars is $84,000 beginning in '08. And of course, since this is a factor salary, every time salary goes up, the city's contribution would go up. The contribution that we make is based on two things. It's based on the surcharge, which is a fixed rate, and another rate which is larger, usually somewhere between 4.5 to 6.5, and that's about as high as I've seen it in the last 15 years. And that's an actuarial number that the actuary puts together each year, and everybody pays that same rate. So I think what the city has got to decide to do is, if it's going to join, I think in the interest of fairness to our employees, we should make the decision as soon as possible, one way or the other. As I pointed out in here, it is a considerable impact on the budget for future years, because you're talking about, at today's rates anyhow, about 0.5% on the tax dollars. So I'll try to answer any questions, or did I confuse everybody? Was that muddled?
Bruce.
I won't claim whether I got confused or not.
Okay.
But my question isn't based on that. You had said something to me about the kind of the status, the rating of the state's retirement system. under the current program that we're in.
Yeah.
And how it compares to other states' pension
Right.
systems.
They did a survey back in, I guess, right before they did the changes in '98, and they found out that the state of Maryland was like 49th out of 50 states in the richness of the benefit that is given to its state employees. The most recent one raised it up to 48 out of 50. So the progress has been very slow. I will say that since this is tied in with the teachers' plan, that I know the teachers' unions pushed very hard to get this increase in this past legislative session.
And so I would take from that that this isn't a very good pension system.
It's getting better from what it was. This formula would give an employee, if they were full 30 years under the new formula, 54% of their pay, their high three, at the end of 30 years. Before they made the last change, they were getting about 34% or 38%.
Yeah, I remember that.
Which is
So
terrible.
Yeah, but at least dramatically we're moving in the right direction. And I have to, in a sense of full disclosure, I have to let you know I'm under this plan. So my viewpoint is not entirely objective.
If I could just follow up on the comment that Bruce made. I remember when we first started looking at this, we were at about, my recollection is 30-something%, which was very low, and you say now we're up to 50-something%.
Well, if you apply to, not, people who have time in the plan now won't get 54%.
But I mean, as somebody who was hired
If somebody were hired
July 1,
when they retired in 30 years, they would get 54%.
Under the current system.
Under this revised
under this system,
Under this revised system.
under the one that we're talking about.
Where, and of course, they would be contributing 5% of their own pay into that. So.
Which isn't unreasonable.
Well, one of the things that's interesting to me about this is that it has a contribution both by the employee and by the city, and whereas it looks to me like the city is still paying a larger percentage of the total cost than the employee is.
That's correct.
But the ratio has gotten different. The employee
more
is
balanced.
paying a bigger percentage than they used to pay of this system. So I think what I'm trying to say is the pension is increased without having the cost of the city increased by the same proportion.
That's correct.
Okay. But the city still continues to pay more than the employee would pay.
So if we take the 9+% net that the city would be contributing starting roughly about that with the surcharge and everything, the employee contribution is now 5%.
Right. Instead of
Whereas right now this year it's 8.1 and 2%.
right.
And I'm sure Mark is aware of these. Are you in the state retirement plan, Mark, or does Montgomery County have different? I don't know.
The teachers were carved into a somewhat, they're in a different plan than whatever was applied to the teachers was applied
Okay,
to
because
just
a lot of the teachers in the state are affected by this.
A question that I had was, now, if the city opts into this plan, do employees have the choice of whether they opt in or not, or do you just opt them?
No, they do not.
Do we have a sense of?
I would have to get AFSCME to agree that this was okay. I mean, it's a bargaining matter from that viewpoint. But all the employees would go in or none go in.
So
it's not a choice, an individual choice.
So the proposal that you're making to the council this evening is whether the council would approve of it, and if we say yes to you, then you take it to the union.
Then I'm going to take it to the union
and if they said no, then it would go.
I guess it would die.
Okay.
I've already approached the union. I'm hoping we can resolve this pretty quickly so that we can start the increased deductions on July, with the July 1st pay, which actually is about July something later in the month. But
Even though the proportions are adjusted somewhat, it still seems like a very good deal for the employees. Of course, any defined benefit plan is a very good deal for employees in this day and age.
it absolutely is.
Are there any other questions?
introduction, I would say that, first of all, I apologize for being late, but I was graduating a fifth grade class, or moving the fifth grade class in my school campus, and this is our ceremony. But I know on the pension issue, the state of Maryland has some of the worst pensions in the country, and this is an accurate thing. Everyone might know that. It was a real important issue in a lot of us this week.
Comments, questions? What is the council's sense about this?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, I think that the council agrees to that, so you can go ahead and take it to the...
Thank you very much.
And then the final item on our discussion this evening is a proposal for an elections board. And Jesse, do you want to talk to us a little bit about this?
Sure. If you recall, in December, council briefly discussed establishing an elections board. This work session discussion is an opportunity to provide direction for council to provide direction on how a board might be structured and how it would function. Some of the thoughts that staff had was that the responsibilities and duties of the election board would be to plan and conduct regular and special city elections in coordination with the city clerk, encourage voter registration in the city, conduct voter education programs, periodically review the city's election code and election procedures and recommend changes. The elections board would serve as election judges in city elections, and they would recommend additional judges for appointment prior to an election. And then I outlined some thoughts about membership and composition of an elections board, mainly that elections board members should be qualified voters of the city and essentially have the same qualifications that our election judges would have, that they not be active in a campaign or be a candidate for an office. The council should consider whether you would like to appoint members by ward with one at-large member, making a 7-member board. But my suggestion is that you also consider what you would do if there are not 7 qualified applicants. And so one way to approach membership might be to appoint 5 to 7 members with a goal of geographic diversity but not a requirement, or you might want to take other factors into consideration. I would recommend that the board elect one of its members to serve as chair, that board members would, of course, serve as judges on election day, and that they would be compensated in the same way as other judges are compensated. And I would suggest that you appoint members to staggered 3-year terms without term limits to ensure continuity. And then finally, the ordinance should definitely include a provision for removing a board member if that should become necessary. My final thought was that the city does budget for elections and election judges. The council might want to consider funding some amount of funding for voter education and registration activities to be done by the board.
Are there any comments, thoughts by the council?
So if we say yes to this, then you basically would develop it to the next step and talk about, you'd come back with recommendations for a budget and what kind of activities the board might engage in terms of education and the rest of that.
Right. Well, I'm hoping to hear some ideas tonight that we could include into the ordinance. And then, of course, once we once the ordinance is drafted and adopted and the board is appointed, I'm sure they'll come up with some very specific ideas. But what I'd like to hear is general ideas for what direction you'd like them to go in, so that we can include it in the ordinance.
I think that if I could just throw out one idea, I think that the notion of having a board like this responsible for doing some voter education, I think would be a very good thing. We had an issue on the ballot for the last election, which, although it was very popular, when I first started going door to door, I would say that not too many people I spoke to we're very familiar with it. And, you know, it's not really fair to expect the entities that bring these things forward to do all the voter education. And I think certainly, once the council has agreed to put it on the ballot, I think having a board that could do some voter education would certainly be a good thing.
I would also like to weigh in favor of this idea. I think that given the activism and energy in our community for politics and for elections, that this makes sense, and it will give the city clerk some way to include the community throughout the year instead of just during the election season. So I like the idea. I think that we've had a number of things come to us that residents have been interested in, including instant runoff voting and
But we did paper ballots.
The referendum on, right, the paper ballots and the idea of lowering the number of signatures needed for getting something on the ballot, and this would be a place to channel those ideas and get community input that is separate and apart from the council, and then certainly the council would have to make the decisions. But so I like the idea, and I think that what the structure that's been proposed sounds like a good one. I know when we talked about election judges the last time around, we wanted to make sure that they weren't hamstrung in the campaign activity, because that might be a reason that people wouldn't get involved. And I see here that election board members would be constrained, not being able to advocate for a candidate or a question on the ballot, and I think that probably is appropriate. And then would the pay for the board members be zero unless they served in the judge capacity?
I think typically elections board members do serve in that capacity. That's just one of the things that they do. And,
Okay.
And if they, assuming they do serve, that they should probably be compensated the same way as the other judges for their service on that day.
Okay.
Unless you want to.
No, that sounds appropriate to me. I think we have a lot of volunteer boards, and so I think for the 12 months of the year, for them to be volunteers makes sense. But then on election day, I'd like to see them paid the same way the same way judges have been in the past.
A thought I had this evening, and I haven't come up with anything that would answer my own question in the affirmative, but my question is, can we conceive of anything where there might be a reason to have a differentiation, or there might be a restriction, or something that needs to be addressed vis-a-vis non-citizen voting and their representation on the board, and any way that might need to be something that was dealt with? Did you think about that at all, Jesse?
That's an interesting thought, that one criteria that the council might look at in appointing judges, you might want to consider a non-citizen voter.
And whether there's anything, I don't know, I just off the top of my head, a scenario where it's a majority of the board is non-citizen voters, and does that affect anything? Are there any requirements for an election board within the state that would cause any problems with that?
I wouldn't think so, but we'll definitely research that.
Since I know that you have to maintain that separate list in the city, it's not something that you get from the county, and I just didn't know whether there were going to be any glitches that might come out of that.
And definitely something to consider.
And I'm assuming that the board would then become the entity that kept the list of non-citizen voters, is that right? Or would it still be the clerk?
I think that should probably remain the same, that
Okay.
that would still be the clerk.
Okay. But the board might be charged with the responsibility for informing people who are not U.S. citizens of their ability to vote in city elections and assisting them in registering.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
This is tangential, but seems like the right time to bring it up. I know our campaign finance is very separate from any other board of elections, the state or the county. But I wonder if that's something that the board should be tasked to consider, is whether or not, instead of people filling out, who run in municipal races, just fill out papers and we keep them on file here, or whether it would make sense for us to require them to be part of the state reporting system, where things are then put on the website and they're much more available to the public. I'm not sure how the council feels about that, but it seems like an idea that the board could consider.
And I just wonder if that might cause some restrictions. I'm not sure what they might be, but in terms of any, I don't know whether the state has certain requirements in terms of time frames or something that might change how we do things.
Well, presumably, the board could figure out a way to put them up on the city's website if we didn't want to become part of the state system, and then make them more available that way. Because Bruce brings up a good issue. The timing is different for our elections than it is for state elections.
We basically have a 5-week campaign period, and I wonder whether the, filing of stuff with the state, whether they might say, we can't deal with that short time frame. You got to give it to us 3 months before, or something like that.
But actually, the other problem that we might have is they do all their stuff on their election years, which we have off-year elections, and so they don't have requirements on those years because they don't have elections on those years. So
It's probably just worth investigating.
no, but
what that might
it sounds like a very good idea, and maybe they could come up with rules and ways of distributing that information. Get rid of those huge corporate contributions that go to city candidates.
And there's boxes and boxes of papers that are associated with it.
I wish I'd got the big corporate campaign. Then I would
No, you
turn
don't.
it down. Actually, I do turn down corporate contributions. I do. Side conversation. All right.
Did you offer them?
Anything else? Did you have anything particular that you wanted to sort of get a council comments on, other than, in general, the things you laid out here?
No, just to see what other ideas you might have had, and the non-citizen representation is definitely, if anyone wanted to comment further on that, or sort of develop some thoughts on that, that might be of interest in drafting this.
I'm not sure I would want to require it, but certainly it's a good thing to be looking for. In some of my campaigns, I sent out materials to people who are on the non-citizen voter list, and my observation was that the moving out of the community rate among that population was quite high. As a matter of fact, one of the things that I did is I provided the letters that were returned to the city clerk so that she could take them off the list, people who'd moved out of the community and weren't at that address anymore. And we don't really have a way to clean the non-citizen list because, since it's not tied into the state, we don't know if those people have moved unless we send them something. So, we could, one of the things that the election board might think about doing is cleaning the non-citizen list by, figuring out a simple way. If you just send a postcard, you don't even have to ask them to do anything. If they're not there anymore, the postcard gets returned. And then you know that they're not there anymore.
that's definitely something I've thought about, and I feel like I'd rather have a group of a community group involved in that than having me, as the clerk, be the one who's cleaning the list. Frankly, I'd like to have a little broader involvement with that.
Yeah. I think that's sort of a tricky question, and I agree that would be a good thing to have them take a look at. What sort of people were you looking for the board? Are you looking for people with any particular kind of expertise?
There's a lot of expertise in the community, but there's also a lot of political activism in the community, and I think it'll be interesting to see when we advertise. There are clearly some of the people who served as election judges this past time were really dynamic people who some of whom actually may not be involved politically in the community and might be interested in service on a board like this. And my guess is that election judges generally tend to be really serious, thoughtful people, and my guess is that there are a group of people out there who would want to do this, and if the because there's a lot of expertise, I think the board can continue to draw on that, whether they're the people who are extremely familiar with voting and voting systems, even though they wouldn't necessarily be serving on this board, they can be a resource for it, as the Rob Richies of the world were, in the last election. What I'd like to do is schedule to work on the ordinance and then come back in July with a two-reading ordinance drafted.
Okay.
And then we can get things moving in the fall. I had hoped to do it sooner, but realistically, groups don't form in August, so.
Right. And I assume you're looking at the possibility that there's still a possibility for a special election in the fall. So you need to think about that possibility when you're planning your time frames. We have one council member who is still running for other office.
Oh, okay.
So if that unnamed council member were to be elected, that unnamed council member would be compelled to resign such unnamed council member's current seat on the council, leaving a opening for a special election.
Is that required by ordinance? Or?
Yes. There's a period of time, and I can't remember how many days it is, but if an opening occurs more than 240 days before an election, then it has to be filled by special election. If it's less than that, it's filled by council vote.
I just thought that unnamed council member might wear two hats.
No, I think that's specifically prohibited. Okay. Is there anything else?
I have nothing.
All right. Okay. We may have set a new record. We were ahead of the schedule for the entire meeting. If there's nothing else, we're adjourned.
Then come the many children now, poor little